It's 19 to 9 right here at Biz by the Water. Welcome back, everyone, and happy Friday. It's great to finally be at the end of the week. And for some of us, it's the first week back at school. And of course, for me, yes, for me, it's the first week back. And it's quite disappointing. Big shift. It feels like a big shock to the system. But anyway, let's get back to the sporting topic of Biz by the Water. We've been chatting recently all about swimming and why endurance still matters. So distance swimming was a big topic of last episode. And private school phone ban even popped up in there a bit. But elaborating more on distance swimming, chatting all about why you need to work on your back end speed, especially for a 1500 and even in 100s and 200s. But the show is so packed today. We're chatting all about cross country and why it complements swimming. So yeah, and of course, it's also a very busy time in the political world and the radio industry. And I do 2 other podcasts about that, Biz Politics and Biz Audio. So you can check those out, courtesy of the Biz Network. And of course, text the text line 0424 257 028. Let's get right into it here at Biz by the Water. So as some of you may know, I am also a cross-country athlete as well as a national level swimmer. And swimming and cross-country look totally different, but they're actually built the same way and they build the same kind of athletes. And this is why doing both can make you better at each of them. And once you break it down, the crossover is kind of obvious, of course. Look, there's similarities in the technique, and why cross-country does help swimmers. It works on the endurance and, of course, the leg movements. And yeah, it's endurance-based suffering, of course. Pacing mistakes are usually similar in each. Breathing control, that's one thing I see in a lot of cross-country athletes, people that I train with as well, and a lot of advice from coaches, is that, look, they want you to work on your breathing control, which is quite easier in swimming, of course. When you're doing freestyle, it's a bit different in breaststroke, but in freestyle, butterfly, and even backstroke, you can control your breathing. You can change the breathing pattern, switch it around to sort of calm down your heartbeat a bit. But in running, it's a bit more natural, the way you sort of breathe and up, down, sort of fast breathing. And that's something we try to work on a bit. And I remember like the first time I did a full 7K, that's where I really control my breathing. And that's where I did a big PB to 29 minutes. That's a bit slow now, but look, I can, of course, work on that. And looking over, consistency, of course, is way better than talent. I think that consistency is key. You got to keep training so many times a week. That's one thing I've sort of started to realize as I sort of start to get back into the swimming things. But of course, talking about the aerobic base, cross-country builds huge cardiovascular capacity. Running teaches discomfort tolerance. Of course, it's a big thing with swimming as well. And helps kicking endurance and, of course, tumble turns. Of course, tumble turns is a big thing where you push off and you want to get that good underwater. One thing that I've been trying to work on recently is when I'm pushing off my underwater, I haven't been going very fast. So that's, of course, one thing that we try to work on in the swimming world. And cross-country teaches fighting late race fatigue. And that's a big one as well. Of course, that back-end speed plays a big part in swimming in the last 50 of 100. Or in pushing that last 15 meters, kicking, getting your head down, not breathing the flags is a really big one as well. And swimming does feel easier mentally after long runs, and they both complement each other big time. And of course, low impact aerobic work, it protects joints during high mileage, or in kilometers we use here in Australia. Breathing discipline, I talked about that just before. And active recovery, it flushes your legs without pounding them. And technique awareness, swimming notices inefficiencies sooner, and that's a big thing with swimming. You notice your technique a lot, whereas running, it's sort of a bit different. I remember I saw a physio once because if you looked at my legs, they were crossing over. If you drew a straight line down in the middle across half my body and onto the floor, you could see that both my legs were crossing each other's paths, and that was sort of not very good. And my hips sort of had a bit of a problem there. I've sort of had to try and fix that since now. And if you look, because I'm a breaststroker, the way I stand, my feet point outwards. Normal people probably have their feet pointing straight when they just stand or even walk, but my feet are sort of pointing like a frog's legs. That's something that I've sort of had to try and adapt to when I run because it's not really good technique for running. But this is also one thing I want to talk about with technique. Why technique still matters for elite swimmers. I know a lot of people talk about why technique doesn't really matter these days, but fatigue exposes flaws and efficiency equals speed plus endurance, but technique is still a massive one. And of course, cross-country does have its own version of technique. But swimming, look, I know people say endurance is key, and endurance is the only thing that can get you places. But if you look at it this way, look, technique is the whole point. Like your catch, for example, in your breaststroke, you have to, I've been working on sweeping out and catching that water. And doing the high elbow drill for freestyle is a massive one. That's a really good thing that can affect your technique and even your speed. So yes, technique does fix your speed as well. Although it might not seem like it, that's a massive thing that I think a lot of people are starting to realize as they develop in the swimming world. Now we're chatting all about pain tolerance versus panic. Cross country is pain and slow burn. And one thing that I used to chat all about with my former co-host Caleb, some of you remember him, is that we always used to chat about the manageable burn. It's when you're doing your cross country run, you can feel the burn, but it doesn't hurt to the extent where you have to stop. Whereas in swimming, if you're doing for example, a 400, that's bad example, 400 IM or even a 200 butterfly, you can really feel that burn, and at some point you'll have to stop. For example, when I was training today, I pushed off the wall and I pushed off in that wrong spot. And of course, my legs started cramping up. It was around my thigh, the back end of my thigh. And you know that area that it cramps up in is honestly the worst part because you can't move your leg. My leg just seized up and stopped working. Every time I kept trying to climb out of the pool, it just kept cramping up again, even after I stretched it out. And that was probably the worst part of my training for the day. But so look, that manageable burn, it does hurt. And there's a difference between actually this hurts than I'm actually in trouble. And of course, swimmers who do run handle lactic pain better, and that's a really big thing that I've started to realize and work on a bit more. And of course, look, there's a big difference in pain that actually changes how athletes race. And of course, next up, we're going to chat about how pacing mistakes affect big things in, for example, a 400 free. Like if you go out too hard in the first 400 of a race, that you're done for. But in cross country, the first kilometer adrenaline in cross country, I think every cross country runner does know what I'm talking about there. You always have so much energy and you feel ready in a cross country race. Whereas in swimming, I think I just feel a bit more nervous. Of course, the start is a big part. If you mess that up in a 50, you're sort of done for. And the smallest mistake in a 50-meter race can be the difference between first and last place. I always talk about 0.50 can be the difference between first and last in a 50. Where we look at state age, where I believe it was the 15 meters 50 freestyle. That was honestly the smallest gap I've ever seen between first and I think it was 20-something place. It was so small, and I think we see that a lot in 50s. Even state, they are so competitive, and you have to be like top 5 at least in the rankings to have any chance at actually going anywhere in it, because that's the biggest thing I think in 50s and even hundreds. There's even bigger gaps, but there's a few less people who do it, and of course that's why I think I like to stick to some of the other events. Not that I do a 200 IM very often, but yeah. But we're going to talk about training alone and training versus groups right up next. Now, of course, there's a big difference between cross-country training and swimming training. Swimming equals the black line and quiet suffering, while cross-country is full of packs, surges, and positioning, and that's a big part of cross-country. I remember every time I sort of start a cross-country event race, I always try to get either towards the side. I remember there was one year where we did it out at the, I think it was the horse tracks, and it had been used in the previous days, and it had been raining, of course, so it had been so muddy. So I remember I tried to get onto the outside, and the minute they say go, I sort of slide forward a bit. I know people who slipped and didn't actually end up doing any of the race because they slipped and injured their knees. And that's a big thing with cross country. You sort of got to position yourself well, because it's honestly like a pack of dogs out there. As soon as they say go, it's every man for themselves. And honestly, I sort of love that about cross country. Whereas swimming, it's a bit more consolidated. There's 8 to 10 lanes per race, depending what pool you're in, and you of course you can't go into anyone else's lane. That's a big thing. Remember that race where that person, I think it was 1500 free, he set the world record, and he got DQ'd for accidentally falling into someone else's lane at the end when he was celebrating. I do remember that, and that was a very sad moment in swimming. But I'm pretty sure he got the world record a bit later. But of course, while both styles build different confidence, of course, with cross country, you sort of got to be a bit aware who's around you. Same thing with swimming, but you're sort of looking and sort of trying to pacing yourself. That's one thing I see a lot of people do, looking over to see, am I going too fast? Am I going too slow? And sort of looking, of course, where I am in the pack. Am I doing correct speed? Am I going PB pace? And yeah, that's a big thing. And the environment actually shapes mindsets more than people think. And I think that's a big thing that we can all take away from that. And of course, we're going to talk about off-season mistakes that athletes end up making. Doing nothing versus doing too much. I think it's good to have a balance. It's good to find a sort of midway between maybe training 3 times a week for swimming. And of course, there's a big difference between training so much for cross country and training so much for swimming. For cross country, I'd say maybe 4 times a week. For swimming, training so much, maybe 6 times a week for swimming. Of course, you can go away from cross country for maybe a few days and still be fine. But in swimming, they say the more rest you take, the worse it is. For example, I'm pretty sure Michael Phelps once said, if you take 2 days off, it'll take you 4 days to get back. And how many days you take off, you double that. And that's the amount of time it takes you to get back. And of course, losing feel for the water is a big thing with swimming, and losing leg strength for running. And of course, same for swimming with kicking. And that's a big thing. Of course, that's why we work on kick so much. I started working a lot more on my kick recently. And I found after taking 3 weeks off of even kicking as well, it really does impact us. But crossover training does save seasons, and I think that's a big thing. Whenever I was training by myself over during the holidays, I always used to do a bit of running as well. Of course, I think that really did help my return to the pool. And even when I did take 2 months off from swimming, I don't ever take 2 months off. Biggest mistake I ever made in my life was taking 2 months off. But yeah, taking that extensive amount of time off, sort of like my long service leave from swimming, that was a big mistake. But yeah, I kept running a bit in that time, and I think that sort of saved my endurance a bit more. Whereas if I didn't do the running, I think I'd still be sort of training to get back up to where I was. But I did do some PBs at state, so I think that's a really nice thing. And we're going to chat by why fit doesn't always mean fast. It's a big thing in swimming, of course. The first in training doesn't always mean the first in the race. I was at swimming this morning, and I did have to tell someone this. So I'll give you a bit of background story. I do this thing called school swimming, which is not really serious. I am probably the person who takes it the most seriously. It's just a bit of, it's sort of swim fit. That's, for people who know what I'm talking about, it's swim fit basically. And I was there this morning, and someone was like, "Oh, Max, I'm going to beat you. I was like, look, the fastest in training isn't always the fastest in the race. And that's a big thing. But yeah, like fit doesn't always mean fast. Of course, there's a lot of strong runners with bad form, and aerobic fitness versus efficiency in swimming and running. I think, of course, aerobic fitness is way more important, and consistency as well. Powerful swimmers do have some poor body positioning, and of course that high elbow on the freestyle is something we really do try to work on a lot. High elbow drill is something I really only adopted in the past 3 to 4 years, but it really has made an impact when I'm trying to catch the water. Catching is a big thing. I know a lot of people, when they're doing breaststroke, for example, don't know how to catch the water, and they find they're spinning. And I actually, that was me yesterday. I found it really hard to sort of catch the water. And of course, even kicking is worse because you feel like you're just sort of going through the water like just so easily, and it feels a little too easy. And that's a really not a very good thing. But yeah, look, confidence built in training is, yeah, really a good thing as well. A bad race doesn't equal a bad athlete, and training consistency does, of course, matter way more. And cross country can humble swimmers. I think that is so true. I'm just reading a few things online. I do my research before I plan the podcast, and there's a few things I put in the program for today. And swim meets teaches patience to runners, of course, because in running, for a cross-country runner, you're only doing one competition for the whole day, most likely and most of the time. But whereas swimming, sometimes you're even doing multiple races in a day for a whole week at a time. That's for, of course, nationals and state. But if you look at like even a weekend competition, you could be doing 7 races in a day. I know people in junior state who did 20 races in 2 days of racing. That's including relays. But that is honestly, I think that's a bit too much. And look, I would never do that. I think the most I've done today is maybe 5 or 6. Actually, no, I take that back. When I did Catholic school swimming last year, I believe, let's say I probably did about 7 races plus 2 relays. And that was, I would never do that again. And yeah, look at it now. I'm not at a Catholic school anymore. But of course, yeah. Look, let's chat about some breathing skills. And breathing is a skill in general. Bilateral breathing versus rhythmic running breathing. Yeah, of course. Look, breathing in swimming is a lot different to breathing in running, but panic breaths does ruin races. Not so much in swimming, but beforehand it might screw up your nerves. But in running, it does play a big part. As I said before, I tried doing a 7K so many times, but I just wasn't getting it. But then I control my breathing because I kept getting stitches beforehand. I tried controlling my breathing, and the time I did that, of course, I did a PB, and that I think was a really, really good thing. And swimmers usually win this crossover skill. Of course, breathing and calm breathing equals control. And of course, we all have control over our, we don't have control over the way we perform, but we have control over the way we train. And of course, training equals results. Well, most of the time. I just have to think about that for a second. And look, why relaxed athletes do go faster, tension does waste energy, and the best swimmers do look smooth. I'm sort of the type of person to swim who doesn't go down to marshalling with any, like, I wear my swimmers, of course, but without any other clothes on. I don't wear a t-shirt, I don't wear a jacket, I don't put headphones in. I don't believe in that, but I know it does help for a lot of people. I know a lot of people who wear headphones, and that really does help them. And I know a lot of people like to keep warm, and they wear multiple layers, and I've only done that once, and I don't really think think it makes a big difference for me. Now, of course, some coaches are going to say, look, he doesn't know what he's talking about. And yeah, maybe I don't, but I've been swimming for almost a decade now. And actually, hold on. It's 2026. Yeah, I've been doing competitive swimming for almost a decade now. And oh my gosh, I'm just stretching my legs as I'm standing up at the studio. I've got a standing desk now. My legs are getting really sore. I didn't stretch them after I cramped at training today. But yeah, back to relaxation under fatigue is trained, not natural. And best runners, of course, look effortless, same as swimming. It looks so smooth. And when you have the good technique to pair with the mindset, it just goes together really well. And look, I think that's all we can talk about for today on Biz by the Water. Look, I think I've stumbled a few times, but this is probably one of the better episodes where I've controlled the amount of times I've said and I've tried to work on that a bit more as I perfect my, God, I said it again, as I try to perfect my broadcasting voice. But of course, you can listen to Biz by the Water wherever you get your podcasts. Of course, we're available on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and of course, you can also catch up to multiple episodes I've done. I think we're at our 95th episode now, so 100 is very close. I've been doing this for half a decade. God, I feel so old. And we do post so much other stuff on the Lockdown Biz YouTube channel. Restaurant reviews, there's a great series that I do with my cousin Ryan. And of course, Instagram, we post shorts, so you don't miss out. Everyone, thank you all. Have a great weekend and happy Friday.